Well, you read the title. Yeah, I don't think the Superman movie was all too great. I know, but just calm down. Wait for a second before you raise your pitchforks. Let me explain, please. Please, I'm begging. Look, I'm not here to get my meat mashed by the Snyder cult, nor am I here to get crucified by the gun gobblers, okay? I'm here coming in as a neutral party. I never really liked any of Snyder's films, and I never really loved any of James Gunn's movies, but I like them, and that's no exception here with Superman. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great one. There's a lot of things that this movie does wrong, in my opinion, and just doesn't deliver a cohesive story. I'm not gonna pretend to be super familiar with the comics though, I didn't really know who Mr. Terrific was, I didn't know who Guy Gardner was, but I really enjoyed their characters and the screen time they had. Most of my knowledge from DC comes from the animated series like Justice League Unlimited back in the day. Admittedly, I'm not the most knowledgeable nugget in this sphere, and therefore, I don't know how much the comics would have influenced my opinion here. So this is coming from someone that's not a super nerd on the comics, somebody that just went in to watch this movie and have a good time. And I did have that. I did have a good time, but I was looking for something a little bit more given how much hype surrounded this film. But first, let's start with the positives. I think it's clear that there was a ton of love and passion poured into this project. It's clear right from the offset when they spammed that Superman theme out the wazoo. They were using that shit every 5 minutes, more times than Elon Musk ego strokes himself in a day. It was crazy. Right until the end of the film, you kept hearing that theme. And I get it, because it's the Superman theme, and I go as far to say it's actually the hero theme, the perfect theme that embodies the goodwill of humanity. And that's something they really nailed in this film. Superman as a symbol of hope, of peace, of goodwill, and just helpfulness. At every moment in this film, he's trying to help somebody out, and I don't think any moment embodies this better than the scene where the Justice Gang and Superman take out this huge kaiju monster. And during that scene, while the Justice Gang is seeking validation and reputation points from the media, Superman is there behind them, just surrounded by a bunch of kids. He's not doing it for reputation, fame, or any other reason. He really is an altruistic depiction of the character, and I just love this interpretation of him. This is how Superman should be, in my opinion, where Henry Cavill's version, Zack Snyder's version, I should say, he seemed really cold and monstrous, almost alien. And I don't think that's how Superman should be. He should be like the brother or the hero, the protector of humanity, somebody that you can just chill out with, somebody that's always there by your side, somebody that's super friendly and approachable. And that's what we got in this movie, and I just love that. And that goes for most characters here. Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl, and especially Nicholas Holtz's depiction of Lex Luthor. I think they all knocked it out of the park. And all the performances here were incredible. Really made this movie feel like a comic book come to life. And all that makes for a movie that is very fun to watch. However, that's kind of where it ends. I don't think this movie does anything particularly good beyond that. The movie is 2 hours long and moves at a pretty fast pace, and during that time, a lot happens, but it also feels like a lot doesn't happen. None of the characters here really have anything going for them. They're given one or two personality traits, and don't get me wrong, they are charismatic, but all of them lack some sort of depth. So, for example, you have Lex Luthor. I hate Superman. I'm jealous of Superman. I want to kill Superman. That's pretty much his whole entire character. Now, I'm not saying every villain needs to be some super deep character where you sympathize with their motivations or you understand where they're coming from and they go through some redemption arc or some shit like that. No, it's all about how they're used in the plot, and I just wasn't a fan of how Lex was portrayed here. At no point during this movie does Lex feel like that cunning, menacing super genius that we've come to know from the comics, the antithesis to what Superman represents. Rather, he feels more like a jealous child throwing a temper tantrum. Yeah, I know that's what they were going for, but personally I'm not a big fan of that portrayal for Lex Luthor being this very cartoonishly evil character that is not really a super genius, just kind of smart. And this portrayal really makes that scene where he captures Superman, places him inside a cell, and tries to get information out of him, and plays Russian roulette with a guy's head and actually kills the guy. It's a very dark and heavy scene that kind of shifts the tone of everything going on. But after that guy dies, he's kind of just forgotten. Like, that whole scene never even happened. I just find it really funny how that guy was pretty much Superman's number one fan, and after getting killed, he just never heard of again. Like, his existence was just erased from the history books. And because that whole conflict and situation was kind of just thrown into the gutter, there was no underlying sense of tension, and the stakes didn't feel heavy. That final confrontation where Superman fought a clone of himself and confronted Luthor had no weight to it. There was no heaviness. It was mostly for laughs and jokes. And that's a common trend throughout this entire movie. There's comedy after comedy scene, and nothing is really taken too seriously. Even when there is a serious scene where Clark and his uncle, or his father, his adoptive father, they come face to face and he's doubting himself, and he talks about how it's the choices you make that define who you are, not what mission you were given or what your parents say. It was just another cliche line. It didn't really do anything for me. I've heard it a million times before in other pieces of media, and this one wasn't done really any better. Even Lois, who you could say is the secondary main character here, didn't move me at all. I wasn't given a reason to care about her relationship with Clark because we never spent time with developing their relationship. There was one scene at the beginning, and then it's mostly just everything Superman. There was no moment to really relax and find a reason to be invested into her character, even though she did a lot of great stuff, like actually save Superman or actually expose Lex Luthor. Like, she had some pivotal moments in the plot, but I wasn't really moved by any of it, unfortunately. Superman's character is also weirdly inconsistent in this movie because in the beginning, we learn how he's this really altruistic figure, right? He loves saving people, helping people, doing anything for those in need, even going as far as saving a fucking squirrel from getting stomped to death by a kaiju monster. The message here is that Superman shows empathy to all living things. He values life above all else. Except when it comes to Ultraman for some reason. Fuck that guy. His life is worth less than a squirrel, apparently. The dude who is literally his own reflection, what he could have been had he listened to his parents' words all those years back, had he developed his mindset with the wishes of his parents. This being, his clone, that is actually just a slave to Lex's whims, who has no autonomy of his own, was grown up as a fucking lab rat. He extends no empathy for. Why? That just doesn't make sense to me. I also think the main plot twist of this movie, the one where Clark finds out that the real message his parents sent him from Krypton, was to enslave humanity and build up his harem of wives. I feel like that fundamentally betrays who Superman is as a character. One of the most fascinating parts about him is that he draws from both Krypton and from his homeworld on Earth. That dichotomy between cherishing your heritage and their values and embracing and accepting your newfound life was one of the core appeals of Superman, in my opinion. However, in this movie, they threw that all away. With this plot twist, and figuratively by killing off his clone, the version of himself that he could have became, he effectively severed all ties and relationships with Krypton, which is a mind-baffling decision in my opinion and goes against what Superman stood for. So at the end, what you have is a superhero movie that is fun to watch, but not really meaningful in any sort of way. And once you strip away all the layers, it's clear that it's mostly just a commentary on, quite obviously, the Israel and Palestine conflict. Prior to watching this movie, I saw people talking about that online, but I didn't really expect to see how on the nose it actually was. Once you watch the movie, it is quite obvious, and I don't have an issue with that. I agree with the messaging of the movie. My problem is that it came at the cost of telling an actually meaningful or good story. So for example, my favorite series of all time is One Piece. I fucking adore One Piece. And you know why? Because it tackles real world issues, human rights issues, injustices, slavery. It just tackles everything you can imagine. But it doesn't come at the cost of ruining or telling a bland story. The plot progresses normally, you get great character dynamics, interactions, progression, development. You get those highs of joy and those lows of heart-wrenching despair. Yet, none of that takes a backseat to the commentary being told. Rather, it uses that commentary, the underlying messaging, as the backbone to the arcs that Oda wants to tell and write. That's my issue with Superman. It doesn't do that. Everything else takes a backseat to the commentary. And it's fine if you like that, but that's not something I particularly enjoy. Again, like I said earlier in the video, it felt like a lot happened, but at the same time, nothing really happened. And that about sums up how I feel about the movie in general. Is it something I'd watch again? No, but do I regret watching it? No, not really. It was a fun time. I had a good time with it. So with that being said, I rate James Gunn's Superman a 7.1 out of 10. But yeah, that's about all I want to say. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, or don't, and I will see you all in the next one. See ya.